Hey there, film fans. Welcome back to Real Talk, the podcast where we dive headfirst into the world of cinema, the good, the bad, and let's call it interesting. I'm your host, Josh Bell, and if you're tuning in today, you've picked a great time. We're just about finished up with our Tim Burton series, just 2 more movies to go. Now, Tim Burton, what can you even say? He's one of those most iconic filmmakers of our time. He's made a career out of crafting worlds where misfits take center stage, where whimsy meets weird, and where darkness is just as beautiful as light, whether it's the gothic romance of Edward Scissorhands or the surreal zaniness of Beetlejuice. Burton's style is unmistakable. But today, we're not looking back at one of those beloved classics. Nope. We're diving into his 2019 live-action reimagining of Dumbo. Yes, that Dumbo. Big ears, cute face, heartbreaking origin story, and all. Now, on paper, this had all the ingredients for success. A timeless Disney tale, Burton's flair for the fantastical, and a cast packed with heavyweights like Colin Farrell, Michael Keaton, and Danny DeVito. It sounded like a match made in cinematic heaven. But, let's just say the end result was a bit more dreamland than dream come true. We're going to break it all down today, the good, the bad, and the downright bizarre. So grab your popcorn, get your feather for good luck, and buckle up, because this is going to be one wild ride. Ready? Let's do this. Alright, let's start by diving into the story of Dumbo. A tale that tries to blend vintage Disney charm with Burton's signature flair for the odd and atmospheric. The movie is set in 1919 in the aftermath of World War I. We're introduced to Holt Ferrier, played by Colin Farrell, a former circus star and war veteran who's had more than his share of hardship. Holt returns to the Medici brothers' circus, only to find it barely scraping by. And as if that wasn't enough, he's also grieving the loss of his wife and trying to reconnect with his 2 kids, Millie and Joe. Talk about some heavy baggage. Enter Dumbo, the wide-eyed, floppy-eared baby elephant who becomes the heart of the story. From the moment Dumbo is born, he's an outsider, mocked and ridiculed for his oversized ears. But, as with all great underdog, or shall I say under-elephant stories, there's a twist. Dumbo's not just different, he's extraordinary. Thanks to a little feather and a lot of courage, he learns to do what no one thought possible. He can fly. And suddenly, this misfit becomes the star attraction, breathing life and dollars into the struggling circus. But, of course, success always comes at a price. Enter V.A. Vanderveer, played with sleazy panache by Michael Keaton. Vanderveer is a ruthless entrepreneur who owns the massive Dreamland amusement park, a place that's less about wonder and more about exploitation. He sees Dumbo as his golden ticket, and before you know it, our beloved elephant is swept up into a world of greed and spectacle. From there, the story becomes a tug-of-war between those who love Dumbo for who he is, and those who see him as a cash cow, or cash elephant. It all builds into a dramatic finale that pits family, freedom, and heart against ambition and greed. It has all the classic Burton ingredients: outsiders, fantasy element, a dash of gloom and doom. But does the plot have the emotional depth and magic to make it soar like Dumbo himself? That's where things get tricky, and we'll get into that soon enough. So let's keep unpacking this thing. Now let's talk about Tim Burton's directorial style in Dumbo, because honestly, it's one of the biggest talking points, or maybe even disappointments, of this movie. Now, right off the bat, you can see Burton's fingerprints. The circus setting feels like it should be the perfect canvas for his signature gothic vibe. We get muted color palettes, quirky character designs, and a touch of that surreal atmosphere that Burton loves to infuse into his worlds. When you see Dreamland, for example, it's got his dystopian, nightmarish shine to it, like a warped sibling of Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. It's the kind of place where you half expect Oompa Loompas to pop out and start singing ominously about the dangers of capitalism. But here's the thing. The whimsy is restrained. Like Burton was told to rein in the eccentric. And what's left is this watered-down version of his style. Don't get me wrong, there is a certain charm to the CGI Dumbo. His big, soulful eyes and the way he moves do tug at the heartstrings. But the visuals, they lack the tactile, hand-grafted magic that makes Burton's best films, Edward Scissorhands, Coraline, and even Sweeney Todd, so unforgettable. Those movies feel alive, like you could step into their worlds and get lost in the details. Dumbo, on the other hand, feels slick but hollow. It's all surface, no depth. It's almost like Burton is on autopilot here. The dark whimsy, the poignant beauty, the imaginative designs, they're all present, but they don't have the same bite or spark. There's no energy, no weirdness. It's like someone gave him a checklist of Burtonisms and said, "Here, tick these boxes and call it a day." And trust me, we're going to dig in a little more to why that might be as we start unpacking this film or continue unpacking. But for now, let's just say this. Dumbo might look like a Tim Burton movie on the surface, but it rarely feels like one in its soul. And for a director whose career has been defined by infusing his films with so much heart, that's a tough pill to swallow. So let's take a look at the cast, because Dumbo boasts an impressive lineup of talent, on paper at least. This is a bit of a reunion for some of Burton's favorite collaborators. So you'd think the chemistry would sizzle. And well, it kind of does, but only in fleeting moments. First up, we've got Michael Keaton as V.A. Vanderveer, the sleazy, larger-than-life entrepreneur. And if you've seen Batman or Beetlejuice, you know Keaton can nail a Burton character like nobody's business. Here, though, he's chewing through the scenery like it's his own personal buffet, but the role doesn't give him much to sink his teeth into. Vanderveer is one note, a caricature of corporate greed without any depth. Keaton tries to inject some fun into it, but it's hard to ham it up when the writing is so hollow. On the flip side, Danny DeVito as circus owner Max Medici brings a surprising amount of warmth and charm. He's sort of like the glue holding the human side of the story together, and you can tell DeVito is having a good time. If there is a standout in this cast, it's him. He's funny, heartfelt, and he adds a much-needed spark of humanity. Then we have back again Eva Green as Colette, the trapeze artist with a mysterious air. She looks fantastic as always. Her costumes are stunning. She carries herself with an elegance that feels right at home in a Burton world. But substance? Let's just say the character of Colette is about as thin as a circus tightrope. Green does what she can, but the script doesn't give her anything beyond being vaguely enigmatic and swooping around on a trapeze. And finally, Colin Farrell as Holt Ferrier. He deserves so much better. Holt's arc has so much potential. A war veteran grappling with loss and finding new purpose. But instead of exploring those complexities, the movie gives him a flat, underwritten role that feels more like a placeholder. Farrell does his best, but it's like he's stuck on a carousel going nowhere. And of course, we can't talk about a Tim Burton film without mentioning Danny Elfman, the maestro behind the great majority of his scores. But even Elfman feels like he's phoning it in here. Sure, there are some moments where the music swells and you feel a touch of that familiar whimsy, but for the most part, it's forgettable. There's no haunting magic, no playful eeriness. It's like Elfman skimmed the script, shrugged, and moved on to the next project. So the verdict on the performances and collaboration? Everyone showed up, but it really feels like they mostly left their A-game at the door. Whether it was the writing, the direction, or just a communal off day as a team, the magic you'd expect from this dream cast and crew just doesn't land. And that's one of the most frustrating things about Dumbo. The potential is there, but it never quite, like Dumbo, takes off. Okay, so let's talk about where Dumbo really tries to spread its wings. Thematically, this should be the classic Tim Burton territory. Identity, belonging, and the courage to embrace what makes you different. All the stuff that Burton usually explores with such heart and poignancy, and did so well just one movie ago in Miss Peregrine. Dumbo, as a character, is the ultimate outsider. He's ridiculed for the very thing that ends up making him extraordinary. That's vintage Burton, right? The misfit who finds strength in their uniqueness. But here's the problem. The emotional depth never takes off. In films like Edward Scissorhands or Big Fish, Burton doesn't just explore these themes. He dives in head first and makes them a part of every aspect of the story. You feel the heartbreak, you feel the triumph and the raw humanity of it all. In Dumbo, these themes are there, but they're barely skimming the surface. It's like the film is waving at these ideas from a distance without ever engaging with them. And then there's Van de Veer's Dreamland. This is where the film tries to add a layer of meaning. Dreamland is essentially a flashy, over-the-top metaphor for corporate greed and exploitation. Van de Veer isn't just a villain, he's a symbol of modern conglomerates swallowing up creativity, individuality, and everything that makes life a little magical. Sounds intriguing, right? Unfortunately, the execution feels about as subtle as a sledgehammer. The commentary on corporate greed is so heavy-handed it's almost laughable. Van de Veer literally tears apart the small, quirky Medici circus to absorb its talent into his soulless empire. And while that could have been a compelling allegory, think about the way Disney itself dominates the entertainment landscape. The film doesn't do much with it beyond the obvious. It's like the filmmakers are pointing at Van de Veer and yelling, "See, he's bad," without giving us anything deeper to really chew on. And what about the emotional impact? Well, it's kind of like watching Dumbo fly in circles. There's some beauty there, but it never reaches the heights that it's aiming for. The story touches on important ideas, like finding family in unexpected places and standing up to exploitation, but it doesn't explore them with any nuance or depth that would make them resonate. So yeah, Dumbo's working with some pretty hefty themes, but it doesn't know how to carry their weight. It's all surface level symbolism, enough to look meaningful in a trailer, but not enough to leave a lasting impression. And for a director like Burton, who's given us some of the most emotionally rich and thematically layered films in the last few decades, that really is a disappointment. When Dumbo hit theaters in 2019, the response was, at best, lukewarm. Critics were quick to praise the film's visual appeal, because hey, it's Burton and you know it's going to look interesting. But when it came to the story, not so much. Words like hollow, uninspired, lacking charm popped up in reviews, which is never what you want to see for a family-friendly Disney remake. Audiences were similarly divided. Some people appreciated the attempt to modernize the classic tale, while others felt it lacked the emotional core that made the original animated Dumbo so beloved. And then there's those who felt the movie didn't quite know who it was for. Was it a nostalgic nod to adults? A whimsical adventure for kids? It tried to be both and ended up not satisfying either. Now let's talk about numbers. Financially, Dumbo pulled in a respectable $353 million worldwide. I mean, that's not chump change, but for a Disney live-action remake, it was underwhelming. Compare that to the billion-dollar juggernauts like The Lion King and Beauty and the Beast, and you start to see why Disney probably didn't break out the champagne for this one. And culturally, this is where Dumbo also really stumbles. Think about Burton's earlier live-action remake, Alice in Wonderland. That movie was polarizing too, but it left a mark on pop culture. It was visually iconic, and love it or hate it, people talked about it. Alice in Wonderland, the soundtrack is still listened to today. Dumbo, on the other hand, is like a footnote. It's not a movie anyone really remembers or is in a hurry to revisit. It came, it flapped its ears for a while, and then it just sort of drifted away, like a balloon that's about to lose its helium. Even in the broader context of Disney's remake factory, Dumbo is an outlier. It doesn't have the same nostalgic pull as The Lion King or the sweeping romance of a Cinderella. It's not quirky enough to stand out. It's not emotionally compelling enough to linger in our memory. So yeah, when it comes to cultural impact, Dumbo is more of a shrug than a splash. And honestly, has anyone been sitting around saying, you know what I really need to watch again? Tim Burton's Dumbo. Yeah, I didn't think so. All right, let's lighten things up a little bit here with some behind-the-scene tidbits about Dumbo. First off, a little nostalgia bomb. Dumbo reunited Michael Keaton and Danny DeVito on screen for the first time since Batman Returns. That's right, a mini Burtonverse reunion here. This time, though, the roles are reversed. Keaton, who was the hero in Batman, is now the villainous entrepreneur, while DeVito, who played the terrifying Penguin, takes on the lovable, scrappy role of circus owner Max Medici. It's a fun twist for fans of their earlier collaboration. Speaking of Burton's creative team, he brought in his longtime production designer Rick Heinrichs to help craft the circus and Dreamland environments. The attention to detail is impressive, especially in Dreamland, which feels like a twisted dystopian version of Disneyland. And let's not forget Danny Elfman, the go-to composer. The score doesn't exactly soar here, but you can still hear hints of that classic Elfman whimsy in the quieter moments. And a fun fact for all the tech nerds, Dumbo's CGI ears were painstakingly detailed. Animators added individual hairs and subtle textures to make them as lifelike as possible. The goal was to give Dumbo a level of realism that still captured the animated charm. And honestly, those big floppy ears are one of the most expressive parts of the movie. But here's where it gets interesting for me. Despite the incredible talent behind the scenes, the production itself reportedly felt a little mechanical. Burton was given significant creative freedom, but the weight of working within Disney's high-stakes remake assembly line seemed to stifle some of his usual eccentricities. The result? A film that's visually polished, but missing that weirdness and heart that makes his best work so memorable. And here's a quick, little quirky tidbit to end on. Burton has said that Dumbo's story resonated with him personally because it's about a character who doesn't fit in. Burton's always had a soft spot for outsiders, and while that's a theme that runs through his filmography, it's especially fitting here. Unfortunately, it feels like Dumbo got lost in the crowd rather than standing out. Much like its titular character, Until, of course, he takes to the skies. So there you have it, some fun facts, a little trivia, and a peek behind the curtain of what went into making Dumbo. Let's just say it's a fascinating look at what happens when a visionary director steps into the corporate circus. So, what are my thoughts? Dumbo is, unfortunately, one of those rare occasions where Tim Burton's magic doesn't quite land. It's like watching a trapeze artist who's lost their rhythm. There are flashes of skill, moments where you see potential, but the performance as a whole feels wobbly. Sure, there are hints of charm. Dumbo himself is endearing in that wide-eyed, floppy-eared way. And there's no denying that some of the visuals, like Dreamland, have that classic Burton flair. But overall, the film lacks the soul and innovation we've come to expect from the director who brought us Edward Scissorhands and Coraline. The muted visuals, while intentional, don't feel captivating. The performances, solid on paper, an all-star cast, but serviceable at best on screen. And the themes, which could have soared with emotional depth, barely lift off the ground. The result? A movie that feels more like a shadow of Burton's brilliance than a shining example of it. So, I'm giving Dumbo a 2 out of 10. Don't get me wrong, it's not completely unwatchable. There are moments where you see glimmers of what it could have been, but in the end, it's like Dumbo's first attempt at flying. Full of promise, but it doesn't ever take off. If you've seen it, I'd love to hear your take. Did it resonate with you in a way it didn't for me? Did you find beauty in the simplicity, or were you left longing for that more Burton-esque magic? Let's keep the conversation going. Drop me a message or comment on social. And that's a wrap on this episode of Real Talk. I think we've unpacked, dissected, and maybe even vented a little about Dumbo. But don't worry, next time we're ending our Tim Burton series with a bang. Or should I say with 3 words? Beetlejuice, Beetlejuice, Beetlejuice. That's right, we'll be diving into the chaotic brilliance, or hopefully, of his long-awaited sequel to the 1988 classic. We're going to see what it's all about and see if it lives up to the original. But in the meantime, make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss a single moment. Follow us on Threads and Instagram at Real Talk for other sneak peeks, behind-the-scenes content, and maybe a few hot takes. And as always, I want to hear from you. What did you think of Dumbo? What's your favorite Tim Burton movie? Or maybe you've got an idea what I should cover next. Let's keep the conversation alive, because at the end of the day, this is about celebrating the movies we love and love to critique. Until next time, keep watching, keep loving, and keep those reels rolling. Thank you, everybody.